Give us an idea then about the kind of the scale of these fires and how they're affecting people.
So you have to understand that what led up to this fire season was a lot of drought. Like we reached this sort of in October last year, which is when we get a lot of precipitation usually up here in Canada. We got barely any, and we were going into April, which is sort of when people start looking out for fire season forecasts and things like that, in a really bad spot. And then starting, April, May, we start to get wildfires, which isn't traditionally wildfire season. Wildfire season tends to start around late July, June even.
Mm.
And since then, we've just had, I mean, the forecasters are saying that they've had to invent a new scale because of the amount of land that's been burned across the country. Hundreds of thousands of people have been evacuated, and just yesterday, a town on the U.S. border, nearly the entire town is on evacuation alert, which means almost 5,000 of them have to be prepared to go at a moment's notice. And of course, yesterday we also learned that a firefighter died on the front lines while battling a fire up here in British Columbia. So it really has been, I mean, we've heard the word unprecedented a lot in recent years, and I know people get tired of it, but it really has been unprecedented in the worst way.
And what I know it sounds like an obvious question, but it'd be interesting to know what exactly is what has caused them. Is it just that the ground is very dry? Is it to do with temperatures? Is it to do with a kind of a collection of circumstances? Why is it so bad so much earlier on this time around?
I did mention the drought. I think that's a big factor in this. Like when we think of wildfires, we often think about like big flames and sparks and all of that. But a lot of fires actually burn on the ground for a long time before they get sparked up by wind or by dry conditions. And so what ends up happening is we've had this drought for a long time now, and we've had a sort of such a lack of precipitation that there's such hot and dry weather. And it's sort of pretty much everywhere you go, even in Vancouver, which is considered, sort of one of these sort of like pleasant cities to live in. We've had basically no rain for like 2 months, I want to say. So it really is a combination of hot, dry weather, a lot of wind, and then of course the drought, which I mentioned. So it's just a bad set of circumstances, really.
And what is the public discourse on the weather and on climate change where you are? Is this something that is debated, contested? Are most people on the same singing from the same hymn sheet, or what is the dialogue?
I think it's sort of widely accepted, especially at the federal government led by Justin Trudeau, especially has sort of talked about how this unprecedented season wouldn't have been possible without climate change. And you get pockets, of course, of climate change denialism. I think that's sort of only natural, but even the opposition parties generally have been, quite supportive of the message that climate change contributed to it. But of course, they have contentions with the government's climate policies in terms of things like the carbon tax, which, basically makes provinces and territories pay more depending on how much carbon they emit. Essentially, it's a reductive way of looking at it. But there are problems with climate policy. But I think, broadly speaking, people recognize that climate change played a big part in the season that we're seeing right now.
And finally, what is the forecast for the next couple of days, weeks, even? Are things going to get better, or are they going to stay at the level they are as far as the weather is concerned?
Well, I would love to say that there's a magical rainstorm that's going to bring us out of this, but the forecasters have sort of been consistently saying that August, which obviously we're heading into in the next few days, there's still going to be sort of extreme fire risk throughout pretty much the whole country. Obviously, right now BC is the most affected, but because of that hot, dry weather that I mentioned, which again, there isn't that much rain in the forecast. We tend to get sometimes these season-ending events where there's a big rainstorm and things start to calm down. But at the moment, there isn't that in the short-term forecast. So we just don't know at the moment. It's likely going to take until the fall or autumn, I guess, for this to really start calming down, and that's not for a while yet.